Hello and welcome to GameSec, and this episode is extremely sexist. You know why, Dave? Because we're not allowing any games that star a man to be on this episode.
Yeah, and you know what? I'm totally fine with that because there are so many awesome games out there with just female leads in them that it's okay.
Yeah, there actually are a lot.
Yeah, but yeah, I think you're still a little bit sexist because, you know, you're still wearing your caveman shirt there and, caveman ideas of women should stay in the cave and stuff. Whereas I'm wearing my beautiful queen of video games.
Why don't we just get to the games? And you've got the first one, so let's just get on with this.
Super Metroid on the Super Nintendo is easily my favorite game with a female lead character. This was the first Metroid game that I actually played all the way through to the end. Sure, I played some of the first game on the NES and part 2 on the Game Boy, but my interest in those titles didn't last long. When I bought Super Metroid, I was a bit hesitant at first because I thought it might be just like the first couple of games and I'd quit playing soon after I started. Thank God that wasn't the case and I was glued to it right from the start. This game has amazing atmosphere to it. Every area that you visit has its own feeling and mood and it just sucked me right in. As you know, the world in Super Metroid is fairly large. You explore all over this world in search of items that will power up Samus and also items that'll help you gain access to areas you couldn't before. To a lot of people, this might sound boring since you go back and forth and see a lot of the same scenery over and over. Actually, it sounds kind of boring to me, but the developers at Nintendo did such an amazing job that I never felt bored at all. Sure, I would see the same corridors and backgrounds constantly, but I loved it. Besides being an incredibly beautiful game to look at, you are treated to an amazing soundtrack. Now, not every track is solid gold, but the majority of them are very good. The music sets an ambience that just adds to the overall experience. And Samus controls almost perfectly. From the platforming to the screw attack to using the grapple beam, it's all as easy as can be. The wall jump is a different story. This is one of the hardest moves in the game, and if you're like me, you failed it at about 93 times, then every so often you'll do it right and wonder what you just did and won't be able to do it again for another 17 times or so. But eventually you'll be able to do it without any problems. The boss fights here are great fun. Most of the bosses are huge, but fighting them isn't really difficult because a lot of the power-ups like health and missiles will be dropped by the boss. And I think Nintendo making Samus a female character is great. They didn't make her sexy, well, not until Zero Suit Samus anyway, but they made her very strong and not easily frightened or shy and just really fun to take control of.
One of my favorites, Phantasy Star on the Sega Master System, tells the story of Alice. The evil King Lassic is spreading tyranny all over the Algol star system. Can't have that. Alice's super courageous brother tries to stop Lassic, but he dies in the process. What a puss. But then Alice makes it her mission to continue her brother's quest. She starts out all alone and with practically nothing, but over time she builds herself up to be stronger and makes lots of headway by fighting monsters and whatnot. She also finds other companions to join her, like Meow, Odin, and Noah. Y'all are gonna need to upgrade yourselves, level up, and figure out your way around these insane dungeon mazes. The game itself was one of the first big 3 console RPGs released in the US alongside Final Fantasy and Dragon Warrior or Dragon Quest or whatever you want to call it. It was definitely the most advanced of the 3 and in my opinion, by far the most enjoyable. Everything just melds so well. The overworld scenes look great and the battles look even better. These scenes are very easy to figure out and lots of fun to play. Then there's the 3D dungeons, which are crazy awesome for an 8-bit game. And to top it off, the music is outstanding as well. It was programmed by Yuji Naka with character designs by Reiko Kodama. In fact, most people who worked on this game went on to form Sonic Team. Anyway, eventually Alice is successful in preventing all the evil shenanigans from going on, and you're even given the choice of becoming queen or not. What will you choose? You can't do better for an 8-bit RPG, and I'm really glad that this was my introduction to the genre. But, you know, perhaps it kind of spoiled me for so many other games that followed, as it's really hard to live up to this one.
Here's Perfect Dark for the N64. Developed by Rare, this game stars Joanna Dark as an agent of the Carrington Institute who's been chosen to lead the fight against their rival Datadyne. It's a long, crazy story that involves the president and aliens, and it'll keep you interested throughout the whole game. The single-player mode consists of missions that Joanna needs to complete. Each mission has multiple parts, and you have a choice of difficulty settings before each one starts. The harder the difficulty level you choose, the more objectives there will be to complete per mission. Getting used to using the N64 controller again for this review was tough, but it was fun once I got the feel for it. I was still pretty spastic at controlling the crosshairs, but I was able to kill lots of bad guys thanks to the auto-aiming feature. The game never gets boring as the objectives are fun to complete and the backgrounds change a lot, which keeps things interesting. Even today, most of the graphics are decent and won't make you cringe. Of course, there are things in here that don't look pretty by today's standards, but most of it's just fine. There's many types of guns and devices Joanna uses that are really fun. Things like night vision and IR vision really add to the experience. The music is solid and the screams of your enemies dying never gets old. I love knowing that my enemies are suffering. There's multiplayer modes and any chance to kill Joe is a plus.
Hey, I was doing good there.
Sit down. Or if I don't feel like killing Joe, we can go at it in co-op mode and play through each mission together. There are so many different multiplayer game styles that you couldn't possibly ever get bored with this title. Rare did a great job, and they didn't try to make Joanna a super sexy protagonist, but just a woman who knows how to handle herself and a gun. Good job, Rare. A sequel was in the works for the GameCube until Rare was sold to Microsoft. Perfect Dark Zero was released on the 360, along with a remake of this game in 2010.
Get her.
Monster World 4 on the Mega Drive is a fantastic continuation of the Monster World franchise. Unfortunately, this was never localized and released in English for the Genesis, but fan translations do exist and you can also get the Sega Vintage Collection Monster World on the PS3 and the Xbox 360. I'm playing a translated version on my Genesis here. Anyway, Monster World games have typically starred Wonder Boy and his name has always been in the title, so it's kind of interesting that they dropped him and added Asha instead. The game is certainly no worse for wear because of this, and it plays and controls fantastically. Is that a word? It is now. You start out in your home village and you get the urge to go on an adventure. The town folks see you out and off you go. Once you get to the town of Rapidanga, the guards only let you in to see the queen because you're a girl and they don't see female adventurers very often. So I guess Wonder Boy's quest would have come to an end right here. Nah, Wonder Boy would have found a way to get in. I mean, he is Wonder Boy. So you're charged with stopping the evil spirits and monsters that are spreading around. You quickly hatch a Pepi Logu which accompanies you. He, she, or it can assist you in many different ways. With a Pepi Logu, you can double jump and also use it as kind of a parachute. You'll need these abilities to get past each area. It can also do even more things like protect you against fire so you can reach higher grounds or whatnot. It's extremely helpful. It's almost like it's by design. Each area in the game is huge, and you usually have at least one mid-boss you gotta fight. I like this one where you're small and you can't damage it at first, but then you go through this doorway and suddenly you're bigger than it and now you can kick his ass. The graphics are great and the music includes a familiar motif throughout the entire game. It's a very well-made game and everyone should play this in some form or another.
When we decided to do games with female leads, Tomb Raider was the first game that came to my mind. A year after the PlayStation was released, this game came out and I was immediately engrossed in all it had to offer. I'm playing Tomb Raider Anniversary on the PS2 for the review since it looks so much better than the original game. This is a remake of the first game and even today it still looks really good. For me, Tomb Raider is great for many different reasons. Firstly, the atmosphere of each level is just amazing and it does a really good job of keeping your interest. There's lots of detail and grandeur in every place you visit. Secondly, it's great for exploration and puzzle solving. Each location has lots of puzzles to solve and they're so well done that they'll have you exploring almost every corner of the game to complete them. I've always loved the platforming in this one. Well, I guess it's part platforming and part daredevil climbing. Laura has absolutely no fear of falling and she's always in some sort of precarious position hanging from a ledge. The control in this version is also much improved over the original game. The first one had almost tank controls, which made controlling Laura fairly difficult. They've been somewhat revamped here, and using the analog stick feels really good. The next thing that I really like is that fighting in this game doesn't happen often, and when you do fight, it's mainly with animals and not humans. Killing these animals is fairly easy, and you can lock onto them with your guns and dodge them when they attack. This game is more about exploration, and I really like that. I feel a much bigger sense of accomplishment after climbing up the side of a cliff or a wall and figuring out a puzzle than I do after killing a few wolves. There's not a lot of music to speak of here, and it's more or less ambient sounds. I actually feel like this fits the game a lot better than a musical score probably would. For a video game character, Laura is an attractive female with nice attributes. Yeah, they might have overdone the size of her breasts a bit, but at least they gave her lots of intelligence, which is always sexy. Anyways, thanks Core Design for giving us a memorable gaming experience.
All right, some pretty good games so far, I think.
Yeah, some great games with some really sexy chicks in there, and
See, now you're just doing it again. You're just going down that hill that we're not supposed to go down, just devolving the show with your sexist attitudes.
But what can I do? I find females attractive. I mean, am I supposed to just hide them inside and, push those feelings down? No, wait, no, these chicks are hot. I like them.
You have a caveman sexist attitude.
Maybe I do, and I like it.
I may look like a caveman, but you're acting like a caveman.
Okay, well...
Anyway, all joking aside, and yes, we are joking, we've got more games to cover, so here we go. Heavenly Sword is an early hack-and-slash game by Ninja Theory for the PlayStation 3. You control Nariko, who's the daughter of the leader of the clan that guards the Heavenly Sword. And that sword's bad news, so everyone's always trying to get their hands on it, causing lots of ruckus and nonsense like that. And if you use the sword, it also causes you to die a slow and painful death. Sounds like fun, sign me up. Of course, it doesn't take Nariko long to wield the Heavenly Sword and start kicking all sorts of ass with it, much to the dismay of her father.
Nariko, what have you done?
Nariko doesn't really look dressed for battle at all. She clearly has weak points here and even here. Huh. Doesn't seem to hurt her much. Well, I guess video games are make-believe and not everything has to obey real-life physics. Who knew? Anyway, most of the action takes place melee style with lots of moves and combos you can do. This is really fun, and even though wave after wave of enemies keep coming at you, I never really get bored with it. There's also some places where you control Nariko's friend Kai. I didn't really care too much for these segments, but they're passable. There's also some tacked-on motion control segments. I hate to say it, but I actually love these. Just like real cannonballs, you can control where they go after you fire them. It's immensely satisfying, especially when I get to fire into large crowds of enemies. This is one of the few times where I think motion control actually works. And I also appreciate the enemies making their vulnerable spots all nice and shiny so that they're really easy to target. I also like the cutscenes. They really show some cool facial expressions, and a lot of them are done with the in-game engine. Andy Serkis, who did the motion capture for Gollum in the Lord of the Rings movies, plays the evil king here, and he's pretty crazy.
Perhaps I'm not making myself clear. I have something of yours, and you have something of mine.
He also did a lot of writing for the game. The visuals are all extremely good for such an early game, but the shadows are really chunky. Unfortunately, that's a problem that would never really escape the PS3. The music is also nice, but you probably won't even notice it much as it plays, but it certainly fits. I don't think a whole lot of people have played this one, and it's really too bad because it's pretty fun. They never updated this one for the trophy system, so that may deter some of the people who only play games for those kind of reasons. But for everyone else, I highly recommend you check it out. It's a good time.
This is Space Channel 5 Part 2 for the PlayStation 2. I have the Special Edition game which includes Part 1, but my disc with the first part on it doesn't want to work, so I won't be talking about that one. I really don't know how to feel about this game to begin with. I really do feel that this game was made for female gamers, as all the dancing and music is something that I just can't relate to or get into. So you play as Ulala, who is a space reporter for Space Channel 5. It's your job to stop the rhythm rogues from stealing people and forcing them to dance. This is all done in a rhythm-style game that's basically like playing the old electronic game Simon. You remember, right? Where Simon lights up a string of different colors and you have to repeat them exactly. Well, it's the same here, but set to music. You only have to worry about 2 buttons in the directional pad, which might seem easy, right? Well, at first it's not bad, but damn, it gets tough fairly quickly. There's 2 reasons for this. Firstly, figuring out when you need to start your button pushes when it's your turn can be really frustrating, and I usually ended up starting late, and this screws up the timing. Secondly, I have no rhythm, so I'm basically handicapped right from the beginning, and that right there means I'll never see the end of this game. You need a bit of rhythm to be able to make it anywhere later in the game, and I just don't have it. The game is a little lenient, and you don't have to be perfectly on time with your reactions. You also get a certain number of hearts, and when you miss a button push or have bad timing, you'll lose one of them. And there's also a viewer rating in the corner of the screen. If you do well, your rating goes up, and when you get to a boss dance-off battle, this rating turns into stars, which becomes your life bar. The higher the rating, the more stars you have. As far as physics go, all the characters in Ulala dance and move realistically. It's actually quite entertaining watching them dance when you do well.
Yay!
I really don't care for the music in this game. It's good as far as composition goes, but it's just dance music that I don't care for. To me, Ulala is portrayed as a girl with expensive tastes, lots of needs, and not overly bright. I'm not really impressed by her as a main character, but for this game she fits just fine. Even though this game has lots of quality in design and build, I'm not a man with rhythm, and the style of this game doesn't suit me, so I'll say pass on it. My copy is now for sale if you think it's something you might like.
Shoot, 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 shoot! Hey! Shoot, 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 shoot! That was too easy.
One of the first games that I always think about with female leads is the Ballast series. Let's look at Ballast 3 on the Genesis here, because that's where most of my memories of the series lie. You star as Yuko, who uses the Ballast sword to protect the human world and also the dream world from evildoers who mean to do them harm. This is some serious stuff, guys. This time, the Ballast sword is stolen and you've got to retrieve it. But it turns out that Cham who stole it was just trying to stop evil herself, so she joins you. Later, your sister Valna also joins you on your quest. For most of the game, you can switch between these 3 at any time. I always liked using Cham because as a Genesis user, this is as close to Castlevania as I was going to get for quite some time. The gameplay is similar to the original Legendary Axe on the TurboGrafx 16. Your sword has a charge meter, and the more full it is when you press the attack button, the more damage it does to your foe. You can get icons that will extend the length of the bar, making it even more powerful, and also icons that help you fill up the gauge more quickly. You also have magic that you can use, but I rarely use them because they just all feel really weak. You have a normal and a high jump that you can do by holding up as you jump. Finally, you've got a slide move to help you get past some tricky situations. There's lots of cutscenes in here, and I like how the male and female characters have different sounds as the letters appear on the screen. The graphics are pretty nice for their time, and some of the music is pretty good as well. This entry right here might probably be my favorite game in the Ballast series. And my least favorite would have to be Sid of Ballast, which is actually the Genesis version of Ballast 2. Well, an SD cutesified version of Ballast 2 anyway. Anyway, check Ballast 3 out if you like some fairly nifty hack and slash action.
Mischief Makers for the N64 is an action platformer by Treasure. This game stars a robot named Marina, and yes, it's a female robot, so it counts as a game starring a girl. It's one of the first 2D games for the system, and it sports pre-rendered graphics that cause polarizing opinion. They don't bother me, but what does bother me is the face that's on all the blocks and everything that resides on Planet Clancer. It's ugly as hell and it's on everything! Anyways, besides the ugly inhabitants and their ugly blocks, I actually really like this game. Treasure has a way with making a solid gaming experience and making games genuinely fun to play. The learning curve for the controller is fairly steep. There's lots of things Marina can do as she makes full use of the controller, and your hands will be moving a lot. I like that you need to use the directional pad to control Marina and not the analog stick. There's not a lot of games that I've played that use this setup, and it's pretty refreshing. Marina can't jump very high, but she does have a dash maneuver that can give her a little bit more height out of a jump. She can also dash left and right, which is pretty helpful. The main gimmick of this game is grabbing onto enemies in certain blocks and shaking them. Grabbing enemies and shaking them will give you jewels that'll give you life and money that can be used for helpful hints. Grabbing onto blocks lets you propel yourself in the opposite direction so you can gain more height. Marina likes to let you know every time she shakes an enemy. She yells, "Shake, shake," but amazingly, I was never annoyed by it and actually just made me think of, never mind. For a system that didn't have a whole lot of 2D games, this is one of the bright spots, and I highly recommend you try this one.
Yeah!
Let's take a look at Sega's Alien Isolation. This is the PlayStation 4 version here. It's 4 times as powerful as the original. Now, normally I don't like first-person style games, but this really isn't a full-on shooter, and it looked interesting. Plus, it was either this or Miss Pac-Man. You star as Amanda Ripley, who just happens to be Sigourney Weaver's daughter. Well, not her real daughter, her movie daughter, you know what I mean. Anyway, this takes place 15 years after the first movie, and it does a really good job of providing the gritty feeling of that one. You're off to the creepy-ass space station Sevastopol since they obtained a flight recorder from the destroyed Nostromo. You want to know what happened to dear old mom, and this might be the only way you can find out. But once you get there, you see that everything has gone to hell and you have no clue why. Well, we as the audience have a general idea, I think. Am I wrong in assuming that they've probably got a problem with a certain style of xenomorph? I mean, just look at all of this graffiti. Definitely a xenomorph. Ah, well, we'd better investigate. The control is very nice. It works as well or better as any first-person game I've played, and I have no complaints about that. Well, maybe except that in order to run, you need to press and click the L stick down, but a big portion of this game is stealth. Running makes a lot of noise, so you don't want it to be too easy to do. But sometimes you definitely do want to run, especially when you see these creepy bastards. As always, you'll need to locate items which will help you get into further areas. You also find security devices where you have to finagle them in a certain way to disengage locks and stuff. It's kind of cool, but weird. You can assemble stuff like medicine after you collect enough parts. And why in video games do they always jam themselves so damn hard with the needle? No, you don't want to do that. It's gonna bruise. You'll also meet plenty of other people who are still on board and still alive. But nobody on the ship really trusts anyone else, and if you're not careful, they will kill you. And yes, you eventually will run into old rubber skin, and the game tries to be unnerving instead of an all-out action fest. I think it really works well here. The visuals are pretty good here with lots of detail and everything, but they're nothing above and beyond what you've seen before. There's not a whole lot of music here, but when there is, it's pretty cool because it's all creepy like the first Alien movie. One thing I should mention is that first-person games like this often give me a ton of motion sickness. But this one actually doesn't, not at all. So I don't know what they're doing, but they're doing it right. Thank you. Anyway, the game is awesome, and it definitely earns the isolation moniker in the title. You do really feel alone a lot of the time. I know I'm probably making this game look kind of boring since I'm mostly just wandering around here, but trust me, it's definitely not boring. It's creepy, but not scary. Actually, it's pretty much just right. This one's very enjoyable to play, and I definitely recommend picking it up for your platform of choice. Just as long as your platform of choice is the PS4. Technology just cannot advance further than this. Until it does.
All right, man, that was a nice looking list of games starring females, right?
I see what you're doing. Kind of working that way, your way here.
Yeah. Well, hey, serious question though. What do you think? Do you think any of these games would have sold better if they had a male lead in there? Say, Tomb Raider had, like, you know, some Indiana Jones type looking dude in there?
Like Uncharted? Like Uncharted? Yeah. Uncharted sells well, so yes, I think it would have. Yeah. But I don't think it hurt sales having
No, I don't think so. No, of course not. It still turned out to be an awesome game, and I personally would rather play just a fun game instead of worrying about who I'm controlling.
Yeah, let me ask you a question. I mean, you pretty much already answered it, but do you think that controlling women, does it make you feel like emasculated or anything like that?
Absolutely not.
No.
Absolutely not. No, I think it's more about playing the game instead of, like I said, who I'm playing.
Yeah, so. Yeah. So it doesn't really matter who you control, just as long as that character is interesting.
Yes.
And the game is good.
And the game is good. Exactly
so,
right.
What are some of your favorite games that star a female protagonist? Let us know. And in the meantime, thank you for watching GameSack.
And that's Super Metroid for you, my 6th favorite 16-bit game of all time.
Oh man, you almost done, Dave?
Yeah, I've got one more to talk about, Joe.
Oh, thank God.
And this is Perfect Dark for the Nintendo 64, which stars the titular protagonist, Joanna Dark.
Did you just say tits?